Okay, so we have a fascinating parasha in front of us. Not only is it fascinating, but we are talking about a change in generations, because we're going from the beginning of the parasha where Abraham goes and looks for a burial plot for his wife Sarah, and kind of that's the end of the we mentioned last week, the last time God speaks to Abraham is by the Akedah. Kind of Abraham made it, and that's it. We don't hear anything about Abraham. Abraham goes, this week's parasha, kind of configures the whole burial arrangement for Sarah. He then calls his servant, which we'll talk a little bit about today, and he makes a sort of arrangement for the shidduch, for the marriage of his son Yitzchak, and that's it. We hear about Abraham dying later on, and that's it. What we do see from the contrast from the beginning of the parasha to the end of the parasha is, the end of one era and the beginning of a new era where Yitzchak and Rivka get married. Rivka goes into the tent of Sarah and kind of brings a new era, ushers in a new era. So we have like a whole generational, multi-generational system going on over here in the parasha. So today I thought to discuss a little bit about probably the most central piece of the parasha, often spoken about, and there's many different angles which can be taken to discuss this piece, but I want to maybe take one kind of approach. So again, as usual, this class is quite text-based, and I'm going to pull up the screen in a second. Basically, we are going to go through some of the psukim, and I want to try together to try and figure out what's going on, because we have a very interesting parasha in front of us, namely that Abraham calls in his most trusted servant. What was his name? Anyone?
Eliezer.
Eliezer.
Okay. Well, how do you know that?
Because I read.
Okay. You didn't read it in the parasha. You must have read it somewhere else. So the Midrash, the Gemara brings it, but in the pasuk, then the person who is going to be taking care of this matter is always referred to as Vayomer Avraham el Avdo. To his servant, he's always referred to Vayomer Eved, Vayomar Eved Avraham Anochi. He's
or
kind
Hamoshel b'chol asher lo.
Hamoshel b'chol asher lo. We have again Vayikacha Eved. We don't have his name Vayisapera Eved leYitzchak. Throughout the parasha, we don't have the name Eliezer once mentioned in the Torah. Now, it's fascinating because, when we talk about someone who's going to be given the job of setting up not only the shidduch for Yitzchak, but also establishing the future generations of Bnei Israel, you would think we would want to know who this guy is. Now, he's clearly a trustworthy servant because Avraham, literally, as Ellen pointed out, is Moshel b'chol asher lo. He gives him, everything. Zekan beto, the elder of his household, who controls all that is his. So that's page 108 in the art scroll. And that's chapter 24, pasuk bet, pasuk 2. So really, we're talking about someone who's really, the CEO of Abraham's estate. Now, don't forget, Abraham Avinu was a very wealthy fellow. He also, with all the mishaps and the troubles and stuff that went on, he really had enough going on for him. Cattle and just people. He was so influential. It was really a big deal. So if this guy is his CEO, this guy is, worth every cent, put it that way. Now, it's just, somebody pointed out to me this week, I never thought of this, but this is just a point to ponder. You go to the very end of the parsha, you don't find that after all, the stipulations that Abraham asks, he asked for one thing from Eliezer. Let's call him Eliezer because that's what the Gemara refers to him as. But the nameless agent gets a mission. He carries out the mission. He brings back Rivka to the house of Sarah. Yitzchak gets married. And you would think that when they meet or when he brings her back, he would go back to Abraham and relate all the story that happened, because we have dozens of psukim. There's like the whole chapter is literally a repetition of what actually happened. And when he says over the whole story again to the father and the son, to Lavan, to Betuel, the whole story to the family of Rivka, which is a whole discussion in its own right. We spoke about it 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But when he comes back home, he doesn't report back. And you would think he would come to Abraham. Abraham would say, give him my blessing. Great girl. Boom. Next generation is going to take over. Very strange. It's just something, a point to ponder. And I'll leave that point with you. Any thoughts, anyone?
It's the first time that I have been, that's come to my attention, that actually his name is not articulated, but so significant is his role, right? He's a vehicle. He sort of facilitates. He's the one who carries out this mission.
It's further than that. I'll tell you.
Yep.
It's further than that. Why? Just before Dan, I'll take your question. When Eliezer introduces himself, I mean, the first thing you do, you come to somebody's house. Who are you? What's your name? What does he say? He introduces himself, and if you look at, again, chapter 24.
A servant of Abraham am I.
Oh, what pasuk is that?
34.
34. There we go. Vayomar Eved Avraham Anochi. I am the servant of my mother. I'm the servant of Abraham. No name, the nameless agent. Who am I? I'm Abraham's servant. It's a complete, in Hebrew they call it hitbatlut, like a complete shedding of his own identity and kind of taking on the identity of his master. That's a real Eved, a real servant is someone who he himself has no identity. He is completely and utterly kind of engulfed, enveloped, taken over by the will of his master. The biggest proof for that is the greatest compliment God gives Moshe when he dies, or even before he died, when Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about him. But especially when he dies, it says, "Vayamot Moshe Evet Hashem." That Moses dies, Moshe dies, and who was he? The greatest compliment of all, Evet Hashem. He was so connected to God that he was literally nothing of himself. He was wholly and purely an Evet Hashem. It's such an incredible compliment to get in that context. But either way, just a point. Dan, you want to say something?
Well, two things. First of all, Rabbi, if I read correctly, Eliezer had a daughter, and he was open very much to that Abraham would accept her as a wife for Yitzchak, which didn't happen. And in fact, I think that concerned Abraham so much that when he asked Eliezer to go on this mission, he made him swear an oath, a very, very big oath, that his mission would be such and such, and he had to carry it out before anything else would happen. If he was unable to because of whatever, then he won't be held to that oath that he took with him.
That's right. So that is a separate discussion. We spoke about, I think, 3 years ago in our class. We elaborated about this whole concept. If I remember correctly, I said over the Gaon Mivilna, which talks about the difference in the wording of Elai versus Ulai, pen versus there's different ways of saying things. And ulai, basically the bottom line is, there's a difference how you say what will happen if. So I'll give you an example. Ulai is perhaps, and pen is also perhaps in the Hebrew language. The problem is the wording which he used over here, Eliezer, was actually the word ulai. Perhaps in this context, ulai is always used as a negative outcome. Perhaps the woman won't want to come back to the land of Israel or Eretz Canaan. Ulai. Ulai means you don't want it to happen.
Quite.
1 second. So anyway, there's a whole Rashi brings the concept of ulai is written without a vav, a liketive, says aleph lamed yud, not aleph vav lamed yud, which means Eli, he wanted him to be able to get a deal out of this because he had a daughter, like you mentioned. But that's really a separate discussion, which is a beautiful idea, and there's a whole background to Yaakov Avinu. And the question on the ulai is a big discussion when it comes to Yaakov, because when Yaakov meets Yitzchak and he's hiding from his father and he puts on his self's clothes and he tells Rivka, ulai yemusheni avi, perhaps my father will feel me. Now, did he want his father to feel him? No. He should have said, pen. But in fact, he says, sorry, I said the wrong thing. Again, ulai means you want it to happen. Pen means you don't want it to happen. Pen yesh bachem shoresh porosh v'la'ana. If God says, perhaps you have someone who's serving idol worship amongst you. That's God says he doesn't want it to happen. Pen, if, perhaps, we don't want it to happen. Ulai means I do want it to happen. Eliezer turns around to Abraham and says, ulai lo toveh, perhaps the woman may not want to come, because he doesn't want her to come because he wants his daughter to get into this, marriage. The question is, by Yaakov, he doesn't say, pen yemusheni avi, perhaps my father will feel me. That means he doesn't want to be caught. He says, ulai yemusheni avi, perhaps my father will feel me, which sounds like he wants to be caught. And the obvious question is, the whole reason why he got the brachot, because he's not being caught. Why does he use the word ulai versus pen? And that's a famous idea of Desla and others to say that this was the greatness of Yaakov Avinu in terms of his truth. Yaakov is the Amud Ha'emet, the ultimate paradigm of someone who speaks truth. Titen emet li Yaakov, we say. What does that mean? Yaakov Avinu was so truthful. For whatever reason, and we spoke about that also a couple of years ago, why the brachot had to come about in this way, where he went to Yitzchak and he had to kind of do the whole trick and cheat him. But if, how does that work in tandem with the concept of Yaakov being the ultimate ish emet, the ultimate truthful person? Separate discussion. But being that that's what had to happen, Yaakov, with all his truthfulness, even when he's cheating, he's so truthful. He can't help it. I know I have to do this. I know I have to get the brachot, and I have to kind of, trick my father into thinking that I'm myself. But ultimately, maybe he'll actually catch me, and I won't have to lie. That's the wording of the usage of the wording in ulai over there. But again, that's a separate discussion, not what we are trying to discuss today. So I want to get in a little bit to the nitty-gritty of today's discussion. And we all know the story, so I'm not really going to discuss the story at great length. We all know he devised a certain test. Eliezer goes to the well. He goes to Haran, where he sees all the girls going out to draw the water, and he makes a deal with God. He said, if it's the right one, and she offers me a drink, and she's smart about it, and she offers us the camels as well, then I know this is the real deal. Okay, so let's look at the pasuk. So the pasuk in Perek Chav Daled, chapter 24, pasuk 12. See, I've got it here on the screen. Vayomar, and he said, Adonai Elohei Adoni Abraham, Lord God of my master Abraham, Hakrena lefanai hayom, grant me good fortune this day, V'aseh chesed im Adoni Abraham, and deal graciously with my master Abraham. Pasuk Yud Gimel, So 13, "Hine anochi nitzav al ein hamayim, ubnot anshe ha'ir yotzot lishov mayim." Here I stand by the spring as the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw water. "V'haya ha'na'ara asher omar eleha hatina kadech ve'eshte, ve'amra sheteh v'gam gimalecha ashke." And the maiden to whom I say, "Please lower your jar that I may drink," and who replies, "Drink, and I will also water your camels." "Ota hochachta le'avdecha le'yitzchak u'ba eda ki asita chesed adoni." Let her be the one who you have decreed for your servant Isaac. Thereby shall I know that you have dealt graciously with my master. So that's pretty much the opening of this whole parasha. And here is the question which we want to kind of grapple with today. What was the point of this test? This test was devised for a reason. Now the question is, did Eliezer devise this test simply because he wanted to figure out exactly who this girl's going to be? He wanted to check her out to see exactly what her midot were, what her background is, what is her modesty like, what is her level of kindness, someone who's going to be appropriate to go into the house of Abraham. And then he kind of used like a omen in the, as a sign to say, okay, this is going to be the one. Or do you say, no, really, Eliezer is praying to God that God should choose the right girl. And God should find the right girl, and this is an indicator that this is actually the right girl. So you've got two completely different ideas. One's kind of I'm doing the work, Eliezer says. I'm going to check out, see if this is the real girl who's appropriate to come to the house of Abraham and marry Yitzchak. Or God's going to do the work. I'm relying completely perhaps on the righteousness of Abraham. But how will I know that this is the right one? Well, this is what she's going to do. That's going to be kind of the sign. In fact, there's actually a discussion, say this in brackets, there's a discussion whether a person is allowed to, with the Jews, are allowed to use omens. You're allowed to say, oh, I saw a black cat cross the street. Going to be a bad day. The pasuk in Sefer Devarim says a person is not allowed to do that. Jews are not allowed to say, it's coming from the, that's what the non-Jews do, different sources, exactly what the point is, but you're not allowed to go and, be, what's the word in English? Use omens to be able to establish, how you're going to deal with things. And the commentators actually discuss on this week's parasha how come Eliezer used an omen to kind of figure out whether this girl is the right one or not. Perhaps if you're not allowed to use omens, and there's a whole discussion. If you use an omen which is random to say, if there's a rainbow tomorrow, I'm going to marry this lady, then that you're not allowed to do. But if you say that something specific will happen about the thing which you're trying to do, that is not something which is prohibited. So over here, he's asking to find out about her kindness, about her midot, and using an omen to say, if she does this, and she's kind, and now I have a significant proof that she's kind, then I'm good to go. That's an omen which is okay. But that's, again, a discussion amongst the commentators about this concept of omen. But coming back to our question, was it Eliezer doing the work, trying to figure out what's going on, and this is just like an omen? Or is it God doing the work, and just he needs to be pointed out who the actual girl is?
Rabbi, that's an interesting question. It's kind of human beings playing out the will of God. I wanted to add that this parasha focuses on two great women. It opens with really the demise or the death of, our matriarch Sarah, and then the rise of Rivka. And my thinking is that the Torah and Judaism places great value in the character of these two women. And the fact that the Torah goes to great detail describing what Abraham does to bring her to her final burial. And that isn't the case with anyone else, right? We are given all these details, how he went about looking for the particular place. This is a tribute and a testimony to this woman, in the same way that this lengthy process of sending the servant man, Eliezer, to to find a partner for Yitzchak. And what is the Torah? What is our takeaway? We're looking for specific qualities, in this partner, in this woman that will become Yitzchak's wife. And Eliezer is the tool, is kind of like he's following the will of God. He's playing it out. It's an interesting thing because he's told what to do, and then he's kind of on the side practicing his lines, or kind of, okay, I need to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and this is what's going to happen. It's kind of like the story is told, and then it's told again.
But it's also very interesting that you would think that, what you pointed out is so true. And I really kind of want to get there at the end once we kind of go through the story. But what's fascinating is, if this was something which was so integral and so important to Abraham, then first of all, the story has to flow, and we'll see there's questions, we'll break that down. But also, you would think that Abraham would be the one who is devising this test to say, hey, 1 second, this is what you got to do. If this doesn't work, then do your own thing. But it seems to be this is Eliezer's own initiative to begin this test. Yes, Dan.
One thing I find interesting, Rabbi, is that Abraham has had close to 50 years to actually proselytize, if you will, or to convert the people around him. And yet, within his group, he was certain that not one of them would be capable of being a wife for Yitzhak. And he's willing to go to his own family, who were at this point heathens. They're nothing less than heathens themselves. And yet he's prepared at this point to send his emissary, if you will, to find a wife that he knows nothing about, except that the family may be through genealogy only, and that he's more capable, or say he's ready to take a chance on that, rather than work with his own community, who he's worked over years and teaching and telling them about Hashem and how his ways. Yet no one there is capable of becoming a wife for Yitzhak.
Fantastic question. Everybody's really, the points coming out today are fantastic. And I will, please God, God willing, if we have time, go through that. I would like to touch upon that as well. So let's dive straight in, because I think there's still a lot to discuss, and let's see how we can get through this. So there we go. Okay, if we go with just simply put option 2, that God is doing all the work, and he's just using this as a indication, as a proof that this is the right God. So here's the question, because if that's the case, he really didn't need to devise this whole complicated test of her character traits, of her midot, her modesty, of her smartness, whatever it is. It seems to be, it's really, he could have said, the girl wearing a red scarf, or whatever it is. It could have easily be done, the girl wearing a Star of David. That's the one who's going to be the one, or I could just ask her, find out who's the girl, which is, from the family of Abraham, and we're good to go. Why did you have to go through this really complex discussion, which the Torah, like we said before, really elaborates in such a lengthy manner? What's going on? Why would it have to be so? I want to point out also just a couple of contradictions in the Psukim. So here we go. So if you look at chapter 24, Pasuk Chavbet. So he's there, he devises a test, and she comes out, and he turns around to her, he asks her for the drink, and she graciously replies, not only will you get it, but also I'll give drinks to your entire entourage. It's fantastic. He's so excited. And she finishes, giving the camels to drink. So he pulls out, as soon as the camels finish drinking, he pulls out the gold nose ring, 2 gold bands, puts on arms. He says to her, the $1 million question. No, whose daughter are you? Because that's what's so integral to this whole thing. And she says, I'm the daughter of Betuel, the son of Milcah, whom she had bore to Nahor. Okay, and then he bows down and he's all happy and all very good. Okay, he finally made it. Okay, the right girl. Now, there's a bit of a technical snag over here because really, if this was the $1 million question, before he jumps out and gives her the golden, bracelets and everything, all the jewelry, he should have first asked, who are you? What's your name? She tells him, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, I'm Abraham's family. And then he should give her, you're all happy, gives her the jewelry. But he first gives the jewelry, then he asks the question.
Because the action of giving water to them and to the camels had been completed. So that was to be rewarded with the jewelry. That was a sign. That was the sign that they had found the right person, right?
All right. So let's jump up a couple of psukim. If the whole deal is a test and she'd passed the test, and then he elaborates the story later on again, and he kind of gives her the whole discourse again, he says as follows. He turns around to Bethuel, Va'esh'al ota, va'amar bat mi'at, va'ton bat Bethuel ben Achor she'adal mikah, va'sim aleh zman apah va'tmidim aladeh. So he changed the story over here. When he's turning over to Bethuel and Lavan, he says, first I inquired, whose daughter are you? She says, I'm the daughter of Bethuel son of Achor, whom Mikah brought to him. And then I put the ring on her nose and the bands on her arms. Why change the story? This was a test. She passed the test. I gave her the jewelry. By the way, the information of, who she is, what's her background, doesn't really matter because that's not really what I wanted. What's going on? Seems to be there's some story missing over here which we're not aware of. So Rashi obviously jumps in to save the day. Rashi in the pasuk before says, "La'achar shenatan la sha'ala." He first presented and then he asked. Why? It says Rashi, "Fi shaya batuach b'zchuto shel Avraham sheyitzliach Kadosh Baruch Hu darko." Because he was confident, the merit of Abraham, that God will make his journey successful. All right. Look over here. Later on, the Rashi, when he talks to Bethuel, when he changes the proceedings, says Rashi, Shinaha said, he changes the order of proceedings. Because first he gave the presents and then he asked. But rather he changed it around because he doesn't want, unnecessary questions. Hey, how could you give it to her? You only came for the whole reason because you wanted someone from Abraham's household, and now you're already busy jumping, giving the bracelets even before you know where she comes from. Says says Eliezer, I'm not going to come into technicalities and get caught up with subtleties. I have my own, stuff going on. I believed in Abraham's merit, but I don't want to get hung up on that. I don't want them to get hung up on it. So he kind of changes the order. So there is something going on over here in terms of the breakdown. Now, there is another question, which is also based on, Ellen, what you just mentioned, is on another pasuk. If you look at the original discussion, or especially later on with Bethuel, he kind of convinces Bethuel that I'm looking for someone from the family of Abraham. Look at the pasuk later. Change this round. Yeah. Sorry, wrong one. Vash'al otar. Sorry, wrong one here. Here we go. Here, source 7. When he turns around to Bethuel, he says to him that Abraham ordered him to get a son. You shall go to where? To my father's house, Abraham says, to my family, and get a wife for my son. So there's very clear particulars over here, which family he's going to look for. Dan, to your point, he's not looking at the locals. He's looking specifically at Abraham's family. We'll get there in a minute. But if you look at the pasuk where Abraham is actually really instructing Eliezer what's happening, look what he says. Pasuk Gimel, pasuk 3. I specifically don't want to take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites amongst whom I dwell. Ki el arsi ve'el moladati telech v'lakachta isha livni liyitzchak. But you'll go to the land of my birth, and take a wife for my son Yitzchak. He says, don't take from here, go to where I come from, but he doesn't talk about his family members.
Right.
So there's something very strange, and yet, Eliezer's pitch to Betuel is, Abraham specifically asked for the family, and that's why he has to change to make sure that fits in. The first question I asked her was the family, and then I gave a racist because that all worked out. Happy Larry. There's something funny going on over here, which we're not quite sure what's going on. Go ahead.
At the beginning of Lech Lecha, it says Lech Lecha mi bet avicha, mi
Leave your house and your father's house, yeah.
Right, and so it's missing here. It doesn't say mi bet avicha here. As opposed to, it does appear in Lech Lecha.
So it's very interesting you point that out. I actually didn't think of that. It's a very interesting point. It's strange, though, that Eliezer kind of fits that in over here.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's in there altogether, but he misses out the other parts. He adds in, this major piece of mishpachti, my family, and he leaves out what actually Abraham actually instructed him. So there's something funny going on over here. Now, there's another piece which is kind of strange. Because if you look at Lavan, Betuel, their perspective, then if it's very clear that, again, Eliezer's pitch is Abraham wanted one thing. He wanted family member. And Dan, that's why he didn't want anybody else. Why? We'll get to in a minute. But he wanted a family member. Okay. So this whole thing of the test seemingly is really unnecessary. Because, why would you need to test amongst all the girls that are coming out to the well? You have to check out all the girls of Haran to find the girl who's, from the family. That really doesn't make sense. I just need to find the girl who comes from the family.
Maybe that's what the story's embellishing. The fact is that he found this girl, and the story's built around that she's capable of watering the camels and watering him to show him that she's got personality.
But that's not his selling point. That's not his selling point. His selling point is one thing. Abraham instructed me, I get a wife for his son, only from his family. He should have come, knocked on the door of Betuel. Hey, Betuel, I know you're long lost family of Abraham. Rivka was actually, I'll tell you the family tree. Here's the family tree. You want to hear it?
But Rabbi, what are you saying? Are you saying that he was looking for failure? He was hoping not to find someone?
No. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying the point of the whole search was family member. And then he goes.
It was a done deal, right? There wasn't a need to.
There wasn't a need. That's right. So the point being is, if he went to, as you say, knock on the door. Listen, I come from Abraham. I'm looking for a wife for his son. He wants a family. Show me who you got.
Right.
And we go through this elaborate story about, we're gonna have special words, and if she comes up with special. So what is the point?
More than that. There's more than that. It's because when he comes to the well, he's essentially testing out of all the girls there. He's trying to figure out who's the chosen one.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the lucky girl?
Yeah.
But what do you mean who's going to be that? Even if you're the best midot and you have the camels and you gave the drink to everyone, you really all out, and you're not from the family of Abraham, she's not going to do it. It's not going to work.
Right.
So really the test almost seems like a waste of time.
Yep.
Okay. Now, just a bit of family background. Can't have a good class without some Jewish geography. So here's how it goes. Abraham had how many brothers?
2.
Good. What were their names?
Nachor.
Good. Nachor. Good. And who else? Haran.
All right. Haran, but Haran died.
Haran. You're the one that jumped in the fire with him, all sorts, right? If you want to know the family tree is the end of Parashat Noach. That's page 52 in the Art Scroll, 50 in the Art Scroll, sorry. Terach has 3 sons, Avram, Nachor, and Haran. Haran has the son, what's Haran's son called? Lot.
Yeah.
He has also 2 daughters, one called Milcah and one called Yiscah, which Rashi actually says is actually Sarah. Now, Milcah marries Nahor, and Abraham marries Sarah. Okay, so the two sisters marry
Two
their
brothers.
two uncles, right?
Two sisters married two uncles.
Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah. Two sisters marry two uncles.
correct.
Abraham and Nahor are brothers, and they marry the daughters of their brother Haran, Milcah and Sarah. Okay, now Milcah has a son called Betuel, and Betuel has a daughter called Rivka. So if you do the Jewish geology, then Abraham's niece is Milcah, and that's Rivka's grandmother. And Sarah's sister is also Milcah, which is also Rivka's grandmother. So there's a real family dynamics going on over here. I mean, from a systems perspective, this is quite complex. But let's not go there. There's a very close family relationship. And guess what? You want to hear another one? Nahor, if you look at the end of Parashat Vayera, where basically after the Akedah, there's a whole breakdown of the geology of the family. And literally, Milcah has 8 children. Nahor had 8 children. And, from his wife, and he has another 4 children from his concubine. How many is that? 8 plus 4 is 12. He also has 1 girl in the family. Who's that? That's the lucky girl. That's Rivka. Okay, it happens to be his granddaughter, but he has 12 children and 1 girl. Who else has 12 children and 1 girl?
Yaakov.
Thank you. Yaakov also has 12 sons.
Yeah,
8
Dinah.
6 from one and
2 from each other.
Sorry.
Yeah.
8 from his 2 wives, Rachel and Leah.
Quite.
6 Leah had, 2 Rachel had, and 4 from the concubines.
Correct.
Really sounds like a very similar pattern. And 1 daughter, Dinah. So if you also look at the 3 generations, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they're all marrying. Who did Yaakov marry? The daughters of Lavan, right? Who's Lavan? Lavan is the brother of Rivka. So the family tree is literally Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are all containing their marriage in the family system. They're all getting married within this family tree. So there seems to be something very unique, something very specific about the family that Abraham would want that his son Yitzchak is going to continue in that format. So have a look over here. Yeah. Have a look at this.
If you took those relationships in today's concept, they would be considered somewhat
Genetically improbable.
Very improbable, if not illegal.
Yep.
It's almost
Very
almost incestuous in the sense of what we're talking about here. Oh, speaking of that, I guess we talk about Lot as well, the same way. Good
right.
word.
His daughters. Yeah, I mean, it's a complex family dynamic. Right. But what seems to come out from this, if you want to know what Abraham's original, message was, the mission, when he tells them, he doesn't specify that he wants it to be his family, but seemingly he's telling them, go to the land of my birth, get us a wife for my son Yitzchak. Who would be the number one, criteria to fill this role? A family member. That's option number 1. Now, says Abraham, if that doesn't work, then option number 2 is another girl. But ultimately, I really want option number 1.
Rabbi, quick question.
Sure.
Why in this case do we have Abraham sending a servant to find a wife for Yitzhak? Well, under Yitzhak's case, Yaakov is sent on his own.
Right. So
are we talking about that difference in characteristics that Yitzhak is not as strong or capable as Yaakov to be able to?
So no, the simple understanding is the reason why
Or was Yitzhak mourning his mother's death, and he was just not capable of?
The reason why Abraham himself doesn't, go out, but he sends his disciple and his, CEO. I don't really have a good answer for that.
Is it his age? We're told like
It doesn't seem like. I mean, Abraham just came back from the Akedah. He's really, he's gung ho. He's 137 years old, but he's ready to, don't forget, Akedah happens. He comes home after Akedah.
Yeah, and Sarah dies.
Sarah dies.
Right.
Straight after this story, he said, okay, you know what? The Akedah, you know what just happened? The Midrash Rashi brings this. You know what just happened to Akedah? Yitzchak almost died. If he would have died, who knows what would happen next generation? You know what? Now it's time for Rishadach. Okay, now's the time to get married off. So he sends Eliezer. So why send Eliezer? He didn't go himself. I'm not sure. But one
After
thing,
all, Yitzhak was not that young.
but
Yitzhak was near 40.
He's almost 40. So
Yeah.
don't forget, he couldn't marry her because it took till she was 3 to be able to get married, because she was just born at the Akedah, right? So the question is, why didn't Yitzchak himself go?
Yeah.
The answer to that is because Yitzchak had a very different criteria, and
Wow.
Abraham actually talks this out, and he says, "Rak et beni lo teshev shama." Whatever you do, just my son can't go out, and the reason being is because Yitzchak was classified now as a korban olah. He was now designated almost as a sacrifice, and a sacrifice of that level can't go out of Yerushalayim, can't go out of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Yitzchak was not able to actually leave the vicinity of his city. So it had to be that someone would actually take his place. Whereas ideally, who's the guy who's going to check out, the woman who's going to marry and build Klal Yisrael? It's going to be the person himself, and that's why Yaakov actually gets sent out, and he himself goes to choose Rachel and ultimately end up with Leah as well. So that's that point. But coming back to our idea, it seems to be Abraham wanted to contain this marriage within the family, and that would be his first choice. That perhaps wouldn't work out. He would revert to plan B and go to his non-family member, whose criteria had to be that it had to be Baal Chesed, Balat Chesed, somebody who was very, as Ellen pointed out before, all the qualifications necessary, the sensitivity, the modesty, and so on and so forth. Another proof is from the Pasuk. So there's really 2 proofs to this. Proof number 1 is, if you look at the Pasuk, Eliezer turns around to Abraham, he says, Vayomer elav ha'evet. So when Abraham is basically making him swear that he's not going to bring a woman from the girls of the Canaanites, he says, Ulai lo toveh ha'isha lalechet acharai la'aretz hazot. What should I do? Perhaps the woman does not consent to follow me to this land. What will I do if, this is the right girl and everything, but she doesn't want? But if you look at the word, he says, ha'isha, the woman. What's the woman? It sounds like there's a very specific woman who we're looking for, namely the family of Abraham. Because, what's the chances of someone showing up in a city with such wealth and, everyone's heard about Abraham. He's made headlines wherever he goes. And who's not going to want to get married to his incredible son? So don't tell me I won't be able to find any girl of the entire city to be able to come back to Eretz Canaan. Clearly, there's someone very particular who we're looking for. Ha'isha, the woman. Proof number 1. Proof number 2, that he's looking for a family member, not a non-family member at this point, and non-family would only come in if it will be plan B, is the Pasuk later. So he's waiting, he gets the camel drinks and everything. And she does whatever she needs to. The next Pasuk, before he gives her the earring, the bracelets and everything, Pasuk says, V'ha'ish mishta'ela, macharish ladat ha'itliach v'may darko imo. The man, meanwhile, is gazing at her, silently wondering whether the Lord made his errand successful or not. Mishta'eh is like, he's waiting with bated breath. Is this the one? What do you mean, is this the one? What's this going to do with anything? She just passed the test with flying colors. She offered the water. She offered to the camels. She did it with such great etiquette. Such kindness, such sensitivity to everything. What's the big deal? Why is he waiting with bated breath? And then he gives her the bracelet. What's the answer? Because He's waiting for someone very specific. He wants to know if she's the one, but not just that she's got good midot, good character traits, but she's actually the one who is from the family of Abraham. And that's why he's waiting. So the next question he asks her, and then we get to that whole problem with why does he give her the bracelets before he asks? But the next question he asks is, no, where's your family from? Boom, she says, she gets the $1 million answer, and she gets the $1 million, right? That's really what happened. So again, there seems to be from here quite a clear breakdown that what's happening is Abraham is actually sending Eliezer to go down and actually make sure that the first choice of the wife for Yitzchak is going to be a family member.
Yeah. That really is emphasized also because it's fulfilling the ultimate mission of God had promised to Abraham that the land would be his and his seeds. So he's kind of fulfilling that which God had promised him. He has to get someone from his seed, from his family, and only that he can only do that.
No, that wasn't recognized in those days. It was not a maternal society; it was paternal. Whoever Yitzhak took as a wife would then own. It's Yitzhak that would the land of Yitzhak, not the maternal part of it that was really considered at that time.
Right. So the seed could be Yitzchak versus and whoever he marries and the descendant afterwards. Yeah, possibly. Saying it's not a knockout proof to say that even what you're saying is very beautiful. You're saying that Abraham even wants the wife to be part of this system whereby it's going to be part of the family. That's definitely not the conventional understanding, but it's that's what comes out.
Yeah, especially the way the story, it's got to be a very important aspect to get a specific wife for Yitzhak. Otherwise, as we say, since it is a paternalistic society, it shouldn't really matter.
Right.
But it does matter very much so as to who is in fact selected.
Exactly.
But my question, Rabbi, after all this, I have to ask, how old is Rivka at this point?
3.
And she's got all this intelligence to show that, yes, I can water the camels, I can water you as well. And
so this is the famous question, which
3 years old.
When the last time you sent your child 3 years old into the to get the water and to make a
does that make
10 camels? It's a bit of a nightmare, right? But the simple understanding is back in the day, things worked very differently. I don't know when the last time you saw someone who lived. I know in Vancouver they live, very long. The longevity of people here is 100 something. But I don't know a person who lived to 930 or something like that, like Adam Arishon, or like Noah who lived, at the age of 600 just going into the Teva. We don't yet have those. So it seems to be that, things evolved with time and, the maturity level of people were very different. So that is a separate discussion which people do try to kind of clarify. But that being said, I think we have to get back to our original question. So what is this test? We've established that Abraham is asking Eliezer to go and ultimately get a family member for his son Yitzchak. It's very important to him because he did that, his son was going to do that, and his grandson was going to do that, all from his family. If perhaps it wouldn't work out, then there'll be plan B, which is kind of second rate. Somebody else who at least has good midot. But if ultimately this is the plan, so why the test? Why does Eliezer do this whole business of seeking all the girls of Haran and trying to figure out, maybe she's going to give it a camel, maybe she's not. Go knock on the door of Betuel, check out if she dresses nicely, check out if she's a good girl, she's got good midot, see if she, picks up the plates after every eats, and you're good to go. What's this test all about? So what seems to come out, so maybe I'll mention one point. It's just a very sweet idea. You may or may not like this, but I think I like this one. I think what comes out is that if you look through the Psukim, he was looking for something very particular. Yes, we asked originally, was it Eliezer devising this plan to kind of figure out the qualities, or was it God kind of, he left it to God and just, pointing to the right place? If he's leaving it to God to just point to the right place, you're in the wrong address. Go to the address. Go and knock on the door, and then figure out which girl out of all the girls there are. Happens to be there's only one. So you know what? Bingo. Here's your, Bob's your uncle, but or Rivka's your auntie. But the real reality over here seems to be that Eliezer is looking for something particular, something very specific. He needs the qualifications of the mother of the Jewish people to be someone with kindness, someone with sensitivity, someone with modesty. It's interesting when he pours out to her, when she pours to him, she doesn't put it on her back and kind of pours it into him. That wouldn't be modest. So she places it on the floor. And she says, go drink. She puts it on the ground and she lets him drink. So it's not like, this is, extreme modesty of this girl, which this girl is displaying. She also shows this sensitivity. Why this sensitivity? Not only sensitivity, but also smartness. The very beautiful Bet Halevi. Bet Halevi says the following. He says, what is the big deal? So she's a kind girl, very nice. Can you imagine you have a bunch of Rolls Royces, or maybe nowadays it'll be Teslas, or whatever it is, a bunch of entourage coming, and a whole motorbikes, motorcade and all, and the window goes down, and he waves to you and says, "Do you mind? I just came from Seattle, and I'm really thirsty. Can I trouble you for a cup of water?" Let's say it's the Queen of England, for argument's sake. Would you not run to give her a cup of tea, right? Maybe with milk, with a glass, with some ice or whatever? Of course he would. So Rivka sees this entourage. He's never seen anything like it. This whole motorcade, 10 camels, kol tuv Adonai biyado. And it's such a big deal that she gives the camels, but she goes over and above and beyond. But really, what is the test over here? And I bet that he says something fascinating. He says, what Eliezer was looking for was not necessarily only the modesty or only the loving kindness, but he was looking for a woman who's smart. The woman of the Jewish people has got to be someone who's got it there as well. Listen to this. I love this.
No way.
Listen to this. He's got, I think it's very COVID related maybe. He said, he goes to her and he asks her for a drink. She says, sure. Now she's got this jug, which is the only thing she has. She doesn't have, a bunch of plastic cups she got on the side, or compostable cups. She's got this jug, which she's supposed to take home for people to drink from, or people to eat from, people to wash their hands for cleanliness, right? For hygiene. So he says to her, can I have a drink? What does she do? She's got a bit of a dilemma. If she gives him to drink from the jug, he's thirsty, he just came a long journey. He's going to finish drinking. What's she going to do? She's going to chuck out the water? That's not very kind. It's kind of always rude, like, ooh, I don't like this. So what does she do? She says, you know what? I'll give you a drink, and I'll give you camels to drink. That way, she gives the camels a drink. She keeps on pouring, and all the germs are washed out, and now she can go take home her clean, washed out, jug to go home. So we say, whether you like it or not, I think even to think of such a thing is very cute. But the bottom line is, whether you like this or not, again, Eliezer was looking for certain qualifications. Definitely the concept of loving kindness, of, being sensitive, being modest, being kind. That was something which he was looking for. Once he looked for that, then he asked God for a sign. But it seems to be he wanted something in particular. And I just want to finish off that this test, the Brisker Rav was actually the grandson of the Bet Halevi by Soloveitchik, says the following. He said that the reason why he didn't rely on miracles, you know why? Because the test of the mother of Jewish people, the test of the ultimate mother of the Jewish people had to be kindness, not miracles. If you look, in fact, at the pasuk at the very end, in the middle of the story, pasuk 17, the pasuk says, their servant ran towards her. And Rashi brings a fascinating midrash. He says the reason why he ran towards her, and he wasn't looking at anybody else, what kind of singled her out before he even began to speak to her? Rashi says something fascinating. When she drew water from the well, instead of going in, the water came running towards her. A miracle happened. She was so great. So he sees this miracle happening. He runs towards her. He said, one second, this person is someone let's check her out. Is she maybe the right one? So, why doesn't the miracle suffice? Says the Brisker Rav, no. Because miracles is not good enough. If you're choosing the mother of the Jewish nation, ultimately what we need is kindness. And I think that's really a breakdown of this week's parasha. There's so much in it, so full and pretty condensed what we spoke about today, but I think that's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, but Rabbi, I mean, that's all nice, but I find it almost a bit, if anything, a bit insulting. If anybody's got a thinking mind, I mean, please give me a break. First of all, she's 3 years old. And the chutzpah of the family after all this episode is to ask her, 3 years old, do you want to go with this strange man? And she replies, yes. I mean, that is unrealistic.
Right.
It just doesn't follow